What is like the messaging you give to somebody who's just really at the end of their rope? How do you even like start to lift someone up from that kind of?
I think letting someone know there's hope for you. You matter, your life matters, that your tomorrow can be better.
Really the worsening of this crisis.
I absolutely think there's so many contributing factors. But one of the things that I really believe with all the clutter of what goes on with social media and every other thing that people are bombarded with is at the core of a human being. They want to feel accepted.
Episode 71, Stay Classy podcast. Here we go. Excited to have Cindy Kullman on the show today. And before we get into the questions, I just wanted to preface this by saying that this is going to be a little bit of a different episode than what we normally do. The focus of this show tends to be on entrepreneurship, tends to be on, business owners, on people who are, self-starters, performers in their fields, in business and that sort of thing. But, we like to switch it up every now and then. And this particular episode, we're going to focus on a nonprofit that is raising awareness and resources for a very serious cause. And it's also a cause that's very personal to me because this discussion that we're having actually involves the passing of a close friend of mine and an issue that's very personal to me and close to my heart. So without further ado, Cindy Kullman, thanks for coming on the show. So nice to have you. Cindy, first of all, so Knowing You Matter, the organization that we're talking about today, tell people who don't know, as I do, but tell people who aren't familiar with the story of what inspired the founding of Knowing You Matter and how that came about.
Yeah. Thanks, Stevie. Basically, in 2019, well, my husband and I have been married for 31 years. We have 5 sons. And Mikey, he is our middle son. And in 2019, with no signs whatsoever, Mikey took his life. And it completely turned our world upside down. There was nothing showing that Mikey had problems. And so my husband and I just looked at each other and just said, we're going to do something with this. We're not going to just sit down and do nothing. And so we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know much about suicide, mental health, anything. But in our journey of grief, we just started meeting together, grieving together. And we decided to start our nonprofit, and we called it Knowing You Matter, based upon Mikey and who he was and how he absolutely made people feel like they mattered, what he stood for. And we wanted to make sure that we were serving those that have attempted suicide, those who are struggling with suicide ideation, and those that have lost a loved one to suicide. We wanted to make sure that we could make a difference and let those people know that they matter and there's hope and community outreach and support.
Yeah. So after 2019, you guys then sort of started Knowing You Matter around the beginning of 2020?
Yes.
Or before COVID sort of thing. And over time, can you tell us a little bit about well, first of all, let's back up a bit, because I knew Mikey very well. He was one of my best friends, in my later years of high school, and even when I would come back from college. But for people who don't know Mikey, who don't know his story, can you tell us a little bit about who he was and sort of what his life meant and his legacy?
Mikey was a true depiction of just the light, the person who walked in the room, who made everybody feel just accepted, not alone, just that he saw people. And he, even in our own family, our very large extended family, he was that one that would show up at his cousin's birthdays, with a birthday gift and just always just lit up a room. He was the most amazing person ever.
Yeah. I would concur with that. I mean, I first met Mikey around my freshman year of high school, and definitely somebody who, it wasn't just me, but a lot of people looked up to. A lot of people felt was sort of a leader in the room, and in his community, at school, at church. He was somebody who exemplified leadership qualities. And going into college, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but I believe he was, even when he was a sophomore or junior, he was actually a TA here. He was basically like teaching, like I think his major was it industrial engineering?
Industrial technology.
Industrial technology.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like he was not only acing his classes, but he was also teaching other people, other undergrads, the material. And I remember one of my other friends, Josh, and he was saying that, Mikey, with the different talents he had, the different skill sets he had, could have been anybody, he could have done anything. And so that is something that I remember is like the level of talent, but also the level of leadership and of, making people feel like they mattered. When you walked into the room, as you said, making people feel like you're the most important person in the room. Now, I wanted to also introduce you a little bit here. So for people who don't know, again, this is Cindy Kullman. She's the founder of Knowing You Matter. She's you live in Rio Grande still?
Yes.
Okay. Or is it Pismo? Or
Rio Grande.
Or Rio Grande. Yeah, okay. And Knowing You Matter, as we talked about, was founded in 2020 after Mikey's death. And the nonprofit is focused on making a difference in the lives of others while raising suicide awareness and promoting emotional health and wellness in the community. We're going to talk about some of the specific services offered by Knowing You Matter. I thought it'd be relevant for this conversation to set the tone by talking about some of the specific information that's out there, that's available, that people should know about the reality of suicide. So I was looking into this in preparation for this conversation, and the issue has never been more prominent and more important in addressing than it is today in this society. The number of suicides in the United States last year hit a record high. 50,000 people died by suicide in 2022. Which is the highest rate seen since 1941. So that's 80 years. The 42% of Americans experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, according to Pew Research. 22% seriously considered attempting suicide. Those numbers are well up from the 10-year averages from 2011 to 2021. So that tells me that there's obviously a huge crisis with this problem, and it's both in the youth and it's in the older population as well. That's what I found when I was looking into this. It's like actually not. It's not confined to, this is just a problem with people who are, 50 plus, or even just the young people, but this is a problem that transcends generations. Another interesting statistic that stood out to me was that 90% of Americans believe that there's a mental health crisis in the United States. And I'm one of them. I think they're right. I think like, regardless of where you come from, right, left, and we have political conversations on this show, but the reality is that this is something that has society in the grip right now. And I think that what you guys are doing is more important than it's ever been before. So that being said, I wanted to talk practically about some of the ways in which Knowing You Matter equips people to deal with a number of things. One is you guys raise awareness. You also, though, give people practical solutions for dealing with, maybe a family member, a friend, a close one who's having suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, that sort of thing. Talk about those services and what you guys sort of bring to the table in that regard.
Yeah. So what we've been doing with Knowing You Matter are several things. The very first thing that we started with was we decided to tell our story, to break the stigma, because sometimes people don't want to talk about suicide. They don't want to even tell the real story that this happened to me. And my son had no signs that I could visibly see. So we are doing video work, telling people stories that maybe are struggling with it and how they're coping to get through, because often people feel alone. They feel alone. They don't want to talk about what they're actually going through. But if they can understand that they're not alone, that there's other people struggling with the very same thing, then they might be more apt to get help. We've also been doing, we did 2 really large suicide prevention conferences showing just documentary film with people's stories, and also had a mental health speaker. So we've been bringing a lot of awareness just by doing events. Also, we've been doing some bringing QPR trainings. It's called Question, Persuade, Refer, stuff that everyone should understand. Just the basic signs of, seeing somebody who's struggling, whether that's being they're pulling away, they're isolating, they're something about them seems to be changing, they're becoming more inward. Whatever those things are, is we're in this place in our society today where everyone should have some tools even to help a friend or to say, hey, how are you doing? asking the questions.
Enjoying this episode? Subscribe for more content on finding your own path to success. Every subscriber makes a huge difference to the pod, and we're grateful for everyone. And don't forget to throw us a classy like and comment too to let YouTube know that you're a fan of our stuff. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcasting.
Yeah, like, and practically speaking, like, are there specific signs, because I'm sure you researched this a lot, like, are there specific signs that, even though it's, you know, it's not something that can be entirely predicted, but are there certain signs in someone that you've learned that you can see that you guys teach people, like, hey, if these things are happening, if these boxes are being checked, then like it's time to look out for this person? Like, what are some of those like signs?
I would definitely say withdrawing from people, isolating, becoming more inward, you know, and just when those things about a person, if you see them, they're normally, you know, connecting with others, but their behavior begins to change and you see that, you know, withdrawal take place, pay attention. And, you know, in our case with Mikey, he was that outward guy.
Yeah.
Always helping
Huge
everybody
extrovert.
else.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that he ever really got that help for himself. So what I would say is even that caregiving personality that isn't maybe taking that time for themselves, that can be something to look at too. And often we don't even see that someone's struggling. And so the point is to ask the questions, how are you? How are you doing?
Yeah, and like,
you know?
mean it. Like, be
absolutely.
genuine. Yeah.
And see how somebody's doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Not the like how are you say to the cashier, but it's like
Yeah.
the how are you where it's like there's intentionality, there's purpose behind it, and following up with people.
Absolutely.
I think is hugely important. What about for people who are directly affected by suicidal ideation, people who are you know thinking about these things or just suffering from some kind of mental health issue or whether it's like a specific disorder or just, you know, general depression and anxiety, what kind of like tools and resources do you guys like offer to people like that in those situations?
And that's something this year that we're really, really, you know, trying to pay more attention to is that the one who is struggling, when we see that, we need to get that person connected to. Often we think it's just, yes, if somebody's saying, I have a plan, I want to take my life. Yeah. That's a time to say, you know, you need to get the help now. We're going to make a phone call, right? But often what somebody needs is to be surrounded by a support team. And there's people who are there to support us, you know? But I believe that some of the services that are lacking is just people not being able to actually get access to the counseling needed or to the programs needed because of funding. Okay. And we very much are have a lot of plans this year to see what can be done there. But
yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second. Like, what are some of the practical barriers? Like, obviously, you know, I read off the stat sheet. Like, the problem's getting worse, like across the board in our society. Like, what are the barriers? Because it seems like this is like anecdotally, but it seems like there's a huge abundance of services that are out there. So is there like what are some of the barriers that are keeping people from accessing these services, whether it's like literal barriers or whether it's like more mental or like stigma or that sort of thing?
I think a big thing, and that's why we're doing a lot of video work, is really stigma. Often people just don't want to show up to these meetings because they feel like, you know, they're going to be judged, or if someone knows they're, especially high school students, if someone knows they're going, you know, to this club or organization, like and kind of breaking that to let people know that there's resources out there and that they don't have to feel like they're the only one struggling with that.
Do you think that from the research you've done and from like the people you've worked with that there's so I know that close to 80% of suicides committed in America are male. And it seems like the rate of mental illness and depression, anxiety among youth is skyrocketing. So do you think that there's a huge, do you guys focus a lot on like young male, like mental health and suicide awareness and prevention? Like speak to that, like specifically, like how that problem is sort of evolving in our society and sort of what the pushback to that is.
I would say, and it's really interesting because yes, there I believe are more males that I'd have to see all the statistics, but it is really interesting when I was sitting through a training, and I've gone through multiple trainings and trying to learn more, is that everyone can be at risk to mental health. Because I was listening to a training through a gal from Transitions Mental Health, and what she was talking about was there's no one thing that we can say, oh, this is the thing that causes it. There's mental health issues, like there can be bipolar, people can be at higher risk who maybe have a known mental illness. But there's also situational, there's also circumstantial, where something can happen to somebody in their life, let's just say, and this was an eye-opener to me, say when they're young, maybe they went through some form of abuse and it was never dealt with. And then they moved on a few years later and they had a friend die or a parent die, a death in the family. And then that built upon the next trauma. And then maybe that person went into a relationship and their, boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them.
Yeah.
And boom, it was trauma after trauma. And then another situation happened. Mm-hmm. And often young people, their brains aren't fully developed yet to where understanding that things can be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
Do you see? And so the buildup of those things. And so there's not one thing that we can say, this is the number one, reason why. There can be multiple things, even being in the middle of COVID when people were isolated into their homes and people had a really difficult time with that isolation process. Some people probably loved it and they did their homework and their work and it was all good, but many people aren't good with that. And so being around people, and having that social interaction. So realizing that everyone can be at risk. There are people groups that are more at risk. Veterans are very high risk. And even to another point is people who have actually lost a loved one to suicide are at far greater risk of suicide themselves. And that is why one of our programs, because of the deep trauma that as a mother and my husband and my children went through this traumatic loss. And it's a thing called complicated grief. It's not just that you're grieving someone, but you are also going through, how did this happen? The trauma of the actual loss. And so Knowing You Matter has started grief and trauma process groups for people who have lost a loved one to suicide, including even if they've lost a friend, to where we could pay attention to all of the family members and the friends who have now just lost somebody. Like for me, losing a child, to me, was the most horrific thing that's ever happened to me. And I didn't know, how am I going to get through this? And so dealing with that trauma, these classes help people to be able to understand what's happening to their body, what's happening to my brain, and what are some coping tools that I can use to get through this.
And not to try to have you explain all that in one conversation, but like, what are some of the coping mechanisms you guys teach to people? What are some of the practical ways that people can deal with grief, and grief specific to losing someone to suicide?
Breathing, breath work, journaling, talking about your person, doing a living legacy of your child, which is exactly what we've done through Knowing You Matter, is to know that the legacy and love of Mikey's life is going to live on through Knowing You Matter. To be able to say, hey, we have free resources. We care. We care about you. And we've already served over 100 people in a very short period of time that have lost somebody to suicide. And it's making a significant difference and letting that person know, hey, we want to give you the tools to be able to deal through your grief and trauma so that you can be whole and you can, help other people as well.
Did you subscribe yet? If you like our content, it's the easiest way to support the pod. Hit the subscribe button on the bottom right and keep it classy.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about while we're on the subject of grief and trauma, I'm thinking about one thing that I think is really resonates with me is this, like, the idea of guilt, and just like the guilt that people feel after that happens. Like, for somebody who's like in that situation, who feels that way, like what's kind of the messaging that you would deliver to them? Like, how do you go about addressing that?
Well, the guilt piece is in almost anyone that I've talked to who's lost a loved one or a child or, to suicide, usually feels some level of guilt. Even friends. I mean, even friends. I should have been there. I should have talked to, Mikey yesterday, or whatever. But the reality in the guilt piece, and there's different circumstances surrounding, like, my situation with Mikey was I chose not to feel that guilt. Not that I was a perfect mother, but I had such a good relationship with him. So I was very blessed in that. But most people feel a level of guilt. And what I would say is you can't, what we're, Dr. Moreland's teaching in these grief and trauma groups is we walk through these emotions, these feelings of feeling guilt or shame or anything. And we need to learn how to go, no, ultimately, this isn't my fault. It was a choice, and not that they wanted to make that choice. You know what I mean? And to not camp there, it might be a rest stop, but don't camp in guilt. And that takes a lot of just talking about it and being able to talk to other people and go, no, I'm not going to. And there maybe are circumstances where maybe there was a very toxic relationship. And that's just a whole nother set of trauma to work through. Mm-hmm. But I think that with shame and guilt, those things need to be worked on to not stay in that space, because you can never get to that wholeness or even walking through your grief itself if you stay in that spot.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the days after his passing, there was just like an overwhelming sense of, like failure as a friend, like failure as, and I don't think it was just me. I think a lot of people felt that in the community. And so I think that's like one of the hardest parts of it to work through. For people who are on the other side of it, though, so people who are currently experiencing, whether it's suicidal ideation, mental health illness, like what is like sort of the messaging you guys deliver to people in that situation who maybe like are silently or not so silently like thinking about making that choice? Like what is like sort of the messaging, like for somebody who's like listening to this, who thinks like, okay, that's great and all, but like, you don't understand my situation. There's no hope. Like there's no like it's over. Like what is like the messaging you give to somebody who's just really at the end of their rope? Like how do you even like start to lift someone up from that kind of situation?
I think letting someone know there's hope for you. You matter. Your life matters. That your tomorrow can be better.
Yeah.
Tomorrow can be better. But your life matters. You are meant to be here on this earth, and that we need to give that message to people. We need to give them that message that their life matters and they have significance in this world to bring hope to other people. And it's really hard because I have someone very near and dear to me who, after Mikey died, she struggled. I mean, she had already struggled with her mental health, but not wanting to live. And I think staying with that person, like listening to what they're going through, not necessarily trying to fix it, but listening and letting them know that you love them and you're with them in their process. And that nothing, because often people will beat themselves up about, why can't I get through this? Why am I feeling this way? Why can't I get these thoughts out of my head? Mm-hmm. But letting them express that and then letting them know, I'm here for you, night or day. You can call me.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And I tell you, this special person in my life, and she's a relative, is doing amazing now. She's doing amazing because she had a team of people that stuck with her, that wasn't going to abandon her in her moments of darkness. And it was just been such a battle, especially after Mikey died, because it just exasperated her situation. And I'm here to say, with a lot of hard work and a lot of things that she's done to try to move forward in her process, she's doing very well.
That's wonderful to hear. And I think about, like, while you were talking, like, just the amount of people who need to hear that message and need to have someone in their life who makes them feel valued, who makes them feel loved. I think, and this is just me speculating, I haven't done the research, but I feel like the sense I get with, like, the problem specifically of, like, sort of youth male suicide is that there's a number of things at play. It's not just one thing, but I think part of it is just, like, as, you know, first of all, as men, I think men, like, struggle to talk about their emotions, to talk about, be vulnerable, you know, open up. And so it's tough to know when, you know, a buddy of mine, for instance, is not doing well, when he's not feeling well, to know to reach out to the person, make them feel like they matter. I think, you know, also with, you know, this is just me kind of going off a cliff here, but, like, there's a huge sort of takedown of, like, the ideal man in our society. I think that there's a lot of negativity towards the idea of being a man, and, like, towards, like, what men stand for. And I think that combined with, like, this sort of nihilism that we see in our society, where it's like, you know, nothing matters, like, no one's important, like, your life doesn't matter, like, there's no value to human life, there's nothing exists, like, it's sort of, no meaning exists, that kind of thinking, like, has a sort of, like, overtaken the youth, like people my age, like Gen Zers, like millennials. There's just, like, this rampant nihilism that's just like this isn't even, like, a religion thing, but it's just, like, a values thing, you know, just having values, having, like, a moral compass, like, you know, believing that human lives are inherently important, that human lives matter, and are special. That is just totally de-emphasized. How do you, like, sort of address that? Like, do you, like, see that? And, like, how do you sort of address that sort of, like, nihilistic, like, nothing matters, like, kind of thinking in people, particularly in, like, younger people? Like, how do you start to, like, combat that?
Yeah. I think everyone needs to feel a sense of purpose in their life. And when people feel purpose, that their life actually, they are here to make meaning in their life and to impact others. And if they can find that purpose, that makes a really big difference, because they feel like they have something worth living for. And there's so many things to live for.
Excuse me. I wanted to also ask you, in terms of knowing you matter, like, how did that, like, personally help you through the healing process? Because I feel like it's made such a tremendous difference in so many people's lives. But for you personally, how did founding a nonprofit, founding Knowing You Matter, and helping all these people, how did that help you through your own journey?
It's the biggest game changer there was, because I knew for myself that I'm never going to move on from Mikey, but I can move forward. And so I think starting Knowing You Matter helped, to have that living legacy of Mikey's life, but especially to bring healing and hope for people and actually let them know. And for me, as a mom who's lost a child, we just have this amazing group of moms that have lost children, and we are connected to each other, and they're getting help in their journey as I've gotten help. But to be able to turn my pain into purpose, to comfort and come alongside and say, hey, we have some free resources here that can help you, has made literally all the difference in my life, to feel like that's a purpose that I have, that Mikey's life is still living on through this organization to help other people.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was also thinking about is, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't address this, which is, I just mentioned like the sort of like nihilism that we see in society, like the sort of like nothing matters, like human life doesn't matter, like these beliefs sort of kind of rampant. And there's pushback to that. And I know that the organization, the services you guys provide isn't unique to people of faith, but your faith in particular plays a huge role in the work you do as an organization. It's, you know, it's who you are. And I wanted to give you a chance to share like the importance of that and how like the importance of faith and religious belief pushes back against this sort of like nihilistic way of thinking that so many people seem to suffer from.
Well, I will definitely say our organization is for anyone. Doesn't matter what beliefs or anything. It's to help anyone. But for me personally, my personal testimony is that God has been everything to me. He's the rock. He's our rock. He's held our marriage together. I mean, the statistic, and I don't have an actual raw statistics, but it's huge statistic of parents who have lost children. There is a very high divorce rate. My husband and I are together. We are, you know, doing, how do you say grieve well? Because we all have a different grief journey. But God has been there every single step of the way. And I would not be even in this podcast today without him. I would not have done anything that I've done without him. And that is the faith that I have, that he's really the one that's carried me through.
Now, this is a difficult question for me to even ask, but was there ever a moment after Mikey's passing where you sort of like, just to be frank, like doubted that like plan, like doubted that like sovereignty of God? Like was like, basically, was there like a point, were there moments where you like questioned just like, you know, like I thought I knew what this is all about, but like, you know, what is like, what's happening here? Like, or did that conviction never change?
The position that I just really took, I was more, I had two choices. I had one of two choices. There was just no middle ground with what was happening. That I was either going to curl up in a ball in depression, literally, because that's how you feel, flat out. Losing a child is the worst thing ever. Or it was either bitter or better. And I had to choose better. And I prayed, and God's been there every step of the way. But no, I never doubted God.
You know, I know we had a few conversations before this podcast over the phone. And of course, you know, sitting down with someone face to face is different, but I sort of went back and forth with myself about like, you know, how much I would like interject into this conversation. But I will share very publicly that this is an issue that's affected me personally. You know, Mikey's passing was the passing of a close friend. But even before Mikey's passing, you know, mental health, suicidal ideation was something I struggled with for a long time, since high school, as you know. You know, my first suicide attempt happened when I was 19. The second one happened when I was 21, and then most recently last year. So it's something that is incredibly important to me, like because of what happened to Mikey, but also because I feel as though I'm alive today because of the people and the resources that were available to me and that I had access to and that I was, you know, supported through. Now, what's hard for me, though, is to realize that not everybody out there has that, you know.
That's right.
Like, you know, I consider myself fortunate because I had people in my life that reached out to me, that supported me, and moreover, people who told me that I mattered. But what breaks my heart is that I feel like a lot of people don't have someone like that telling them. Like I was walking around in downtown San Diego the other day, and you see just the rampant homelessness on the streets, and I'm thinking like that's someone's son, that's someone's daughter, that's you know, someone's maybe spouse. Like there's no one telling that person that they matter day in and day out, and that like feels sometimes like it's overwhelming, like the despair.
Absolutely.
Like how do you even start to reach people who just feel like they've been totally abandoned?
I think spreading the awareness of how we can do that, you know, and sharing our stories, because you're right. I mean, not everybody does have that family support or friend support or that community support. And I think that that's where we, each individual person, as we spread awareness and say, hey, let's make that difference in that person's life. One of the things that I've been doing, a really good family friend of ours, he's teaches, as a professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and I go into the class there and I speak to the students, and we share the documentary that the journalism students put together at Cal Poly about Mikey's life, the tribute video. They put that together and interviewed different people. But I go into the classroom and I speak as a parent and I say, I just want you guys to know how much you matter. Because I was standing up there saying, you know what? You have people that love you, even if it's one person, that going into that classroom to tell the young students, because that's where Mikey went to school. Yeah. That was the age, he 20 years old, these moments where whatever it is we need to do, like even you doing this podcast, sharing your story, making a difference, we can spread that. And that's through that awareness, that we need to be that for other people, even if they aren't our best friend or our family member, but that we can realize that people need to be seen.
Yeah, I feel like one tough thing is obviously there's people who feel abandoned, feel uncared for, and that's certainly a problem of its own. The other problem is you also have people on the complete other side of it, people who were like Mikey, who was a standout student, excelled in extracurriculars, very popular, very well known and loved in the community. I feel like a lot of people like that who people just don't know that people like that struggle too. And I'll just share a personal anecdote. So my senior year at UCLA, I was doing a lot. I was majoring and minoring. I was playing on the school rugby team. I was writing for the school newspaper. I was working a internship with CBS News, which I was really excited to get and was very life-changing and career-changing for me. But and I had a girlfriend on top of all that, and all these things happening at once. And I had so many people say, "Man, like your life is so great. You're doing so well." On the inside, I was just burning up. I just was doing so poorly. That's right. I remember sometimes before games, or during practices, I would just stand on the sideline and just kind of stare into space, and somebody would reach over and shake me and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was just like staring into space as I was just completely zoned out. Like I wasn't even present. And that was a really difficult time. And I think what people don't realize is it's often the high achievers and the people that are doing the most that also need that pouring into. That's right. So it's just kind of this strange paradox of sorts. It's where it's you have people who obviously need help, who are, as I said, to people who are on the streets, people who have been abandoned by family, et cetera. But then you also have these people who are incredibly successful, these, whether it's the entrepreneurs of the world, or whether it's the startup CEO, whether it's the standout in college. There's all these people who are so high achieving that actually need the most help. And it's just interesting how that works.
Well, I think too, people take on the identity that what they do is who they are versus who they are inside isn't necessarily based on what they do. Yeah. And if people can feel that who they are on the inside is important, significant, their life is important, their heart is important, not just based on what they do, that somehow our performance defines us. Because like you said, for, even Michael, he was an artist. He was successful in everything that he did. He had people around him, but deep inside, something was missing. He was fighting a battle that nobody knew about. And that's the importance of, connecting with people with sincerity and being genuine and genuinely asking questions, not intrusively, but just checking in on people, checking in on them, checking in on the high achievers, checking in on those that aren't high achievers. I mean, every person that we can make an impact, Yeah.
Hey there, classy viewers. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We're dedicated to providing you with quality content that inspires and brightens your day. But keeping it classy can be expensive. If you enjoy our content, we're asking for your support for the podcast using the donation link in the description below. Donations mean the world to us, and even as little as $5 can make a huge difference in helping us make this podcast a reality. Plus, donors are added to our shortlist to be the first to receive exclusive offers on merch, extra content, and even chances to appear on the pod. Anything you can give would truly be appreciated. Now get back to enjoying the rest of the podcast, and as always, stay classy.
It's interesting. I'm just still thinking about like the fact that there's an abundance of services. I mean, there's literally, if I go to a doctor, I can probably get a prescription for anything I want, like in terms of like antidepressants, that sort of thing. Like there's never been, seems like, so many services, like so many therapists out there. There's like a therapist everywhere you turn around the street, but still the problem just keeps getting worse. And I'm wondering, like, do you think that, I mean, we talked earlier about the stigma, especially for young people, but do you think that there's something else at play, like other factors that are contributing to just this, the really the worsening of this crisis?
I absolutely think there's so many contributing factors. But one of the things that I really believe, with all the clutter of what goes on with social media and every other thing that people are bombarded with, is at the core of a human being, they want to feel accepted. And often in our busy world, that isn't happening. It's all about what we're doing and performing in and how high achieving we can go. But at the core of it, somebody just wants to know that they're accepted, that they belong, that they're loved.
How do you make someone feel that way who's just kind of at the bottom of the pit?
I think that we need to just let people know that we're there for them. And sometimes the biggest thing ever is listening to someone and letting them know that we're there to just hear them. People need to be heard, and they need to know that they can talk and be heard.
Yeah. What about in terms of so back to Knowing You Matter, like what, like going into that, I mean, that's a huge enterprise. It's like coming off of such a tragic loss is one thing. And then to start a nonprofit and a nonprofit that's accomplished as much as you guys have so far and is going to accomplish so much more. Like there's a lot of hard work and dedication that went into that. Lots of people think about or try to start nonprofits, but it doesn't go anywhere. What did you do, and like what fueled you that you were successful in doing that?
Yeah, the very first thing that really comes to me is when we started Knowing You Matter, and why we came up, like I said earlier, why we came up with the name Knowing You Matter was because Mikey let people know that they matter. That was who he personified. That was who he was. So when we went into this, we wanted Knowing You Matter not just to reach out to the one considering, the one who's attempted, the one who's lost someone, but we wanted everyone to know, whoever got involved as a volunteer in any of the things that we've done, we wanted them to know they mattered too. That the whole thing, from volunteering to every single thing that we were doing, has to do with You Matter. I just got done doing a really cool appreciation dinner for my auction team because they work so hard for our fundraiser, and just letting them know, hey, you guys are making a difference. And many of the people who serve, most of the people who serve in volunteering, are people who have been impacted by suicide. And so my firm belief is we're always better together. So there's been a lot of community support in Knowing You Matter. And I think that what's been so great about it is that we're doing it together as a community. We're doing it together. Even when we went to Cal Poly and did the Out of Darkness campus walk, and I spoke there for that, but we had Team Mikey. We had like 30 of us out there, and we all came together as a community at large in San Luis Obispo County to do this together. We should never, with organizations, be in competition with one another. We should be working together. That every person, every organization, all has a part to play in the better good of fighting suicide.
And like, I mean, it's clear that you had the passion, that the motivation was there to make this successful. But in the course of running a nonprofit, what are some of the things that you discovered like worked and didn't work? And like sort of what are the, I guess, habits and disciplines you developed?
Oh, wow. We had been doing, because we care about the programs, we care about the impact. But man, it takes a lot to run it. And it took a lot. And we're finally getting to this place of where it's getting a teeny bit easier. But I tell you, the organization that goes into it, and also when you're grieving and trying to start an organization, and I never realized in a million years there were so many moving parts to running a nonprofit. And so it's been hard, but it's been rewarding. And so every ounce of work that we've put into it is paying off. But we've had to be extremely dedicated these first 4 years to just make it all happen. Like our second suicide prevention conference, we had 58 volunteers. And so I really believe in the volunteers because they make the organization run, and we all feel like we're doing this together. It's not about Daryl and Cindy. Yeah. It's not even about just our story. It started based on our story. What we want people to know, and this is what I tell the volunteers and the people who help with Knowing You Matter, is that, this isn't about us. We want this to go way past Daryl and Cindy, and we just started it. But we can make a difference together. We can make a difference if we all come together and we keep the vision that we can make a difference if we let people know they matter, and there's something each and every one of us can do.
I mean, you talk about like making a difference. I mean, you already have. You already have made a difference. It's clear by the number of people you guys have reached, and from the stories I've heard that you already are making a difference. And I would like to think, or I don't like to think, I know that Mikey would be very proud of that.
Thank you.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you about was, are there any like stories from people who you've personally like interacted with in the course of running the organization that you can share? You don't have to use names, but maybe like somebody whose life is particularly touched, affected by the services and by the resources you guys provide.
Absolutely. I won't go into the details, but we had a person who has done our grief and trauma group. She has told her story on video. Lost her son, and 6 days later, we got a call. She wanted to do the classes, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so soon. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is so soon. But no, I want to do this. And she has turned around, walked through her grief, and turned around. She's become a volunteer. She's amazing. She's part of our support group, our mom support group. And you see these stories, and sometimes you feel like, wow, 6 days? It's kind of, because I remember when I lost Mikey, like I couldn't even, but no, she was determined to get the help. And because she's gotten the help through our grief and trauma groups, she's turning around and she's been part of our auction. She's been part of our suicide prevention conference as a volunteer, and she's turned around and affecting many lives.
That's so cool. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's not the only story, but that's a great one. Mm-hmm. I mean, talking about like somebody who just absolutely like a rebound from total grief, total despair to having an impact on other people, and now her story being shared. I thought as we close, like I thought I'd be remiss if I've alluded continually to the fact that Mikey and I were close, but I just wanted to talk about that a little more in depth for a minute. Like I think that we've talked about him being a high achiever and the legacy he left and letting people know they mattered, but Mikey was just a fun guy. He was a lot of fun. He was always one of the boys. He's just like always, obviously making people feel important, but just also always down to have a good time. Always down to, we did youth group together. We did mission trips together in high school. Service trips to Mexico. I think we did a couple to San Francisco too. Maybe to LA also, but we did service trips together. We did youth group together. We hung out together. We went to events together, and I really got to know him, and we got to know each other. And what I can say is that, there was just this infectious energy of when I was around Mikey. Like I really did look up to him, and I wasn't alone. And it was the kind of thing where when he was in the room, you kind of wanted to be like Mikey. You wanted to exemplify that level of confidence and leadership and just like charisma and winsomeness. And there was just a level to him that I obviously like when and I always tell my friends, like whenever I go back up to north of San Luis Obispo, back to Rio Grande, it's just not the same, like not having him there, because it's somebody who I really looked forward to seeing. Even when I was going to school back east before I transferred to UCLA, like one of the few people that I would still keep in touch with and that I would still go back and see on my breaks, spring break and Christmas break, etc. But just we had a lot of good times together, and I really miss the guy. I really do. And I'll say this, that personally it was hard for me, as you talked about people going through grief. It was hard for me as a friend, feeling like a failure as a friend, because even though, the evidence is out there that, it's when someone makes that decision, it's not really up to you anymore to stop them. But but the fact is, I still felt guilt. I still feel guilt every day. And I think like what I would say is that the cruelty of it to me was that, Mikey made me feel like I mattered at times where I was, very in a very low place in life, and I felt like I couldn't do the same when he needed me the most, and that was tough.
Well, just know, that guilt is not yours. That you don't need to feel guilty. And these are the exact things that these grief and trauma classes deal with. And it's been so freeing for people to go through that. And so just know that Mikey knew that you loved him, and there was nothing that you could do, Yeah. No one saw this coming.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing too, is you just never know who's struggling like that. And that's why doing what you're doing, like what Knowing You Matter is doing, is so important. And like, it's why I wanted to do this, like to share his story, but also to raise awareness for other people who maybe even someone's listening to this and they're like, hey, like I'm struggling, or maybe it brings awareness to somebody in your life who might be struggling. You like look at the people around you, say like, who needs help, like who needs these kinds of services.
Absolutely.
Now, in closing, I just wanted to give you a chance for people who are listening to this and want to help out in some way, whether it's financially, getting involved, maybe an upcoming event, talk about ways people can get involved with your organization and others like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If anybody, wants to donate or be involved with Knowing You Matter, just visit us at knowingyoumatter.org. You can fill out on our website just to become a volunteer. We can let you know just about, upcoming events, but we would love to hear from you. And thank you so much. And thank you so much, Steve, for having me here. It's really special to be able to drive down to San Diego this is legacy. You being one of Mikey's friends, and how important that was to my husband and I, and to Mikey, for me to be able to share about what we're doing and how we're coping. And so
do you I feel like to close, like just maybe one takeaway for somebody who's listening to this that's really struggling, who's who's not doing well, like we talk about like the message of hope, of Knowing You Matter, like what's What's something you could say to someone who's in that situation? Like,
There's always help.
yeah.
There's always help. There was something that one of our speakers, our mental health speakers that came to one of our conferences said is, we're only as sick as our secrets. Don't hide it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to somebody about it. Because at the end of the day, people want to help. People want to be there, and there is somebody who can be there.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this has been 71 of Stay Classy Podcast. Thanks, Cindy, for coming on so much. And can't wait to see this one come out. But in the meantime, yeah, if you guys get a chance, check out Know You Matter online. You guys also have Instagram, right? You're at, what's the handle? Is it?
Knowing You Matter. Yeah.
Is it just at Knowing You Matter?
Right.
Okay. Check out the Instagram where they post content pretty regularly too, for up-to-date information. And we're also going to post some other websites and links for how people can get involved in suicide awareness and prevention as well with this episode. But thanks for coming on, Cindy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, that's a wrap. This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy Podcast with your host, Steve Wyer. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, you can find all of our content at our website at stayclassypod.com. And thanks to our production sponsor and partner, MaxLux Media. You can find them at maxluxmedia.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Every subscription helps and goes a long way towards ensuring that we can continue to produce content for viewers like yourself. Thanks so much. Stay classy.